it my side or it's just going to get confusing. So some of you might know me. So my name's Nick Riddle. I am one of the operational directors in DWP, which means I look after the delivery of job centre services across the West Midlands, the East Midlands and Yorkshire and the Humber. But I'm also DWP's national operational lead on all matters youth. And I'm joined today by my colleague Katia, who is one of our deputy directors in policy and has got the privilege of looking after youth policy. I suppose the link for me, and I saw some people introducing themselves in the sidebar. I think I saw people from People and Their Brilliance. I know I saw some people from Groundwork as well. So colleagues that knew me before, in a previous incarnation, I was delivery director for the Kickstart scheme. And it's really, I suppose, about that youth space that myself and Katia have come to talk to you about today. And I should say a big thank you to Elizabeth and Jack and other colleagues from ERSA for facilitating this event for us. I don't really want to waffle for too long, and I don't imagine you guys do either. But the principal purpose for us coming here today, colleagues, was really to try to, I suppose, mine the intelligence from this community and to get some views from you guys using your experience about what has worked for you in terms of reducing youth unemployment in a lot of the programmes and schemes and the areas that you have been running. It feels to me like DWP is at quite a pivotal moment in its evolution in terms of where we are going as an organisation. A lot of you will have read in the press about the fact that ministers are really, really clear that despite all of the great work that goes out there in job centres, and for those of you that visit job centres, and certainly I spend a lot of time in my job centres, you know, I see the outstanding work that work coaches do all day, every day. But there is this feeling out there, I think, that for too long DWP has been focused a bit too much on the administration of benefits and that we need to do something different to actually get Britain working. And I suppose if we reflect on the power of us all across a broader system and perhaps think back a bit to Kickstart, I still remember, and Elizabeth will remember in particular, and other colleagues on the call will, you know, when we were working through the scheme, how complex it was. But actually what made Kickstart work, I think, was the fact that it was that brilliant collaborative effort between lots of different partners in the community, both ERSA, CBI, you know, lots of other organisations that saw us get the scheme off the ground and make it the success that it was. And for me then, I don't think it's fair to say that we've got a blank page in terms of where we're going with a lot of our policy at the moment. But what I mean is we've got that real opportunity, I think, to shape a new service that could be really transformational. And it's the power of this community and other communities that we're talking to a moment that I think will enable that. So just in terms of a brief structure for today, what I thought it might be worth doing was just running through some of the key themes that were in the Get Britain Working white paper. There might be some of you that are sitting there groaning at the moment because you know all about it, you read it in your sleep, but I just thought that might be good to make sure that we're all on the same page, just in terms of what drove the white paper, some of the themes from within it. And then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Katia, who is going to take us through some of the specific areas related to youth. So she'll go into a bit more detail on that. And then it really is, you know, happy to answer any questions. But we would really, really appreciate, colleagues, that feedback from you about what has worked. So as we're thinking about what the design of the new Jobs and Careers Service could look like, particularly in terms of our youth offer and our youth policy, we're really keen to make sure that we have a really broad range of views representing that. So I suppose I'll start with what feels to be some really clear problem statements from the white paper. As I say, if you know this, then apologies, I'm not going to go on for too long. So there were 6 problem statements that jumped out at me, I suppose. The first was a really clear point about exclusion from the labour market, that feeling that there are too many people who are excluded from the labour market. Linked very closely to what we're here to talk about today, that there were too many young people that leave school without the essential skills that they need to embark on a career, or equally to have access to really high quality learning. That piece too, and we see this in job centres, and obviously we do what we can to help around a lot of people being stuck, for want of a better word, in potentially unsecure or maybe lower paid work. That feeling too well around the fact that there were too many women who care for families that experience challenges staying and progressing in work, and that piece too, perhaps linked to the skills agenda, about employers struggling to fill vacancies in their workforce due to the quality of the candidates coming through not actually matching from a skill levels perspective. And I certainly see this in my job centres, running a really diverse patch that runs from Ross and Wine, Hereford, way over in the west of England to, the wonderfully diverse city of Birmingham, Coventry, the Black Country, some real disparities in labour market outcomes relating primarily to where people are based, but also demographic groups as well. And the white paper proposes, I suppose, 5 key elements that DWP and that wider system need to focus on to deliver that transformational change. The first, and it's not predominantly DWP, but a real focus on the NHS and the wider health system in terms of how it can support people back into work. Secondly, a really, I suppose, going with the grain of a lot of government policy, a lot on that wider piece around devolution. So working with mayoral combined authorities and also with our devolved nations as well. A lot of colleagues might be involved in trailblazers at the moment for both inactive customers, but also for our younger customers. And those trailblazers, which Katia will talk about in a bit more detail, are really in that space of trying to focus in on what works at a local level, mapping some of those complex challenges across the system to learn and test new approaches that we might not previously have tried. And as I said, that's very, very heavily focused around our mayoral combined authorities. So I do a lot of work in the West Midlands with the West Midlands combined authorities, but there are others around the country as well. Each area will also have local Get Britain Working campaigns and plans, which is around really convening all of those partners across the system to make sure that we deliver a really place-based service. Thirdly, the youth guarantee, and that's really around making sure that all 18 to 21-year-olds have got access to education, training or a job. And as I said, I think Katia will talk a bit more about that. And then the plank, which I suppose I'm heavily involved in, and I think will be really interesting, around the reform of the existing Job Centre Plus environment. And I think what's interesting for me, and if you call it out the white paper as well, is I think the distinction in the white paper is drawn really clearly between the work that our individual work coaches do on a daily basis to change people's lives, and we've all seen that, and it's incredibly well valued by all of us in DWP, wider, and of course our customer base, but also the fact that systemically there are some challenges that need to be addressed there. And there's a real focus on 3 elements which underpin that service. The first is around engagement, which is around making the Job Centre Plus offer, or whatever it's now going to be called. As I said, we think it's the Jobs and Careers Service, around that wider engagement. So at the moment, we focus predominantly on customers who are on benefit, and the paper signals, I think, can move away from that to a service that is more available for the citizen across the UK, rather than just those in receipt of unemployment benefits. The second is around earnings. We partly talked about that as well, but actually making sure that we can free up work coach time and other partner time to focus on our customers who are on benefit but might be working. How can we actually encourage those customers to progress and ultimately come off benefits? And then also that core focus around our unemployed customers, how do we actually help them into work? And there's certainly a couple of elements that we're anticipating underpin that service. That real digital element, which we don't think we are properly exploiting at the moment, is going to be a real focus for the service. Really making sure that when you come into a job centre, you get that personalised support, building a new and enhanced relationship with employers. I can't remember the exact statistic. I think it's something around the low 20% of employers that at the moment engage with Job Centre Plus. We want to change that to make sure that actually our customers are seen first by our employer population, that focus on progression that I talked about, but also making sure that DWP is really seen as a key partner in that local ecosystem around employment and skills. And finally, the white paper held an independent review into the role of UK employers in promoting healthy and inclusive workplace, which is being led at the moment by Charlie Mayfield. So might be a good time now for me to bring Katia in to talk a bit more about youth. Katia, you're out there?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Katia Shrivastava, the Deputy Director for Youth Policy in DWP. On youth, the latest development is that, as you might have noticed, we have launched a Trailblazer areas earlier this year. So the Trailblazer areas are East Midlands, West of England. This is now trusting all of my areas. 2 in London, one Liverpool, Cambridge, and Peterborough, Tees Valley, and West Midlands as well. Some Trailblazers were so they all received their grant funding agreements, and it's been supported by 45 million worth of funding for this year. Some Trailblazers decided to do a formal launch. So I know that both of the London Trailblazers did a formal kind of day where they kicked off their activities and invited press around it. Also, Liverpool did a formal launch as well, with a Secretary of State attending a couple of weeks back. So, but it doesn't, just because they haven't been necessarily in the news or anything, it doesn't mean that they haven't launched. They all started their activity. They started kind of carry on with their tasks. A lot of they're all very different. And this is very much us working with local authorities and understanding understanding their population, what the challenges are, and them tailoring this particular support to them. Quite a lot of it is focused on I would probably divide it into three categories. First of all is about identifying the young people in their areas. So obviously we know the ones that are on benefits, but keenness here is to identify those people who are inactive as well, and we don't necessarily engage with. So identification of 18 to 21-year-olds in their areas, including in that space, working with their local colleges and local authorities to make sure that they can also use their RONI factors to identify people who might fall into becoming NEET, and kind of addressing both the stock and the flow of NEET 18 to 21-year-olds. The second thing is around bringing the systems together. We all know that there is a lot of provision across particular local authorities, charitable organization, third sector employers, and it could be quite overwhelming for a young person to understand where they fit in. So kind of understanding that there is the data sharing, the systems in place, and there is the right pathways for young people. And then the third part of the money that the Trailblazers are using is around specific provision in their area. So looking at very specific kind of challenges for them, and then if there is a gap in provision at the local level, identifying whether they could basically trial out a pilot of seeing whether an intervention could work. Those interventions are very different because obviously each areas are different, but they range from looking at cohorts, kind of more vulnerable cohorts, such as care leavers or young people with mental health conditions, but also looking at the fact that in certain areas, young people, the biggest challenge they have is the fact that they've never had a work experience. So creating something akin to Kickstart, but also maybe not full Kickstart, but looking at potentials for work experiences, confidence building, but potentially also doing more kind of placements in particular areas. So, but the key thing here is they're all unique, they're all different, they're all trying out something specific for them. We're working very closely with those local authorities, both to make sure that we understand what things are working well in order to obviously create then a national blueprint, but also to make sure that we evaluate it. So each of the authorities are doing internal evaluation and will be doing a national one as well. So that's the Trailblazers. We have also launched Youth Guarantee Advisor. The areas I'll put them in the chat. It might be easier. There we go. We launched the Youth Guarantee Young Advisory Panel. So it's young people, 15 young people with lived experience of being NEET. We've been working with Youth Employment UK and Youth Foundation in order and with DFE to create this panel. So they've had 2 sessions now. One was around kind of identifying what the key barriers are, and a lot of the barriers are quite diverse, but also they kind of stem outside of the employment support and kind of just employment system. A lot of it is around, for example, as basic as limited access to Wi-Fi or inability to travel into jobs, or so quite, not no reasonable housing in the kind of in the local area, but also obviously do they have enough relevant jobs in their locality as well. And then the second session started to get into some potential solutions in this area. And the last thing I wanted to update you is that we've also been working with the 3 national partners that were announced at the white paper. That's the Channel 4, Royal Shakespeare Company and Premier League, to make sure that they promote the youth guarantee in the youth trailblazer areas. They partner with us to kind of identify people and obviously identify opportunities, and they provide opportunities for young people building on the existing programs that they already run, but also design new programs. And it could be, again, varied from specific skills that they could help young people develop to joining them up with local employers. So, for example, Premier League, the Liverpool launch, at the Liverpool launch, have run a jobs fair, obviously working with our DWP colleagues, and there were 700 young people in attendance at the jobs fair. So, so looking at various provision that they can also help us to kind of test and learn in this year of Trailblazers. That's probably my update. Does the panel have anyone with lived experience of criminal justice? I don't know. I can come back to you, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Thank you, Katia. Jack, I think that might be the end of, in a really nice way, that might be the end of me and Katia talking. So very happy to answer any questions, but also, Jack, as I said, really, really keen to try and get any knowledge, experience from everyone out there about things that you think we should be taking into account when we're thinking about policy or around the design of the new Jobs and Careers Service.
Yeah, so thinking about how best to do this, I think maybe if people want to jump in, as they already are in the chat, with a few questions about the specifics of what you've both said, and then maybe Nick, when that kind of trails off a little bit, you can pose a couple of questions to the audience and we'll have a bit more of a structured discussion. So let me just see if I can pick a couple of things up that people have said in the chat to get us started. In the meantime, if you'd like to ask something over mic, please put your hand up and we'll come to you. Is there anywhere a particular agenda of all the programs that's gathered and shared about the different Trailblazers? And I think preempting that a little bit, it might be a bit early days for exactly what's going on, but we sort of all watch with interest. Another thing about if the panel includes autism or neurodivergent lived experience, what the 2 London areas are, and will DWP only work with aged 18 plus learners? So I don't know, Katia, if you can pick any of those up quickly.
So I've picked up the 2 London areas. So there is the Pan London. What it is just as pan, like it's focusing on 18 to 21-year-olds in London, while the Central London Forward does care leavers ones. They have a specific care leavers and supporting about 1,000 care leavers in London. So the panel does include young people with mental health conditions. In terms of autism, we were finding out specifically, our minister's asked as well, but I don't know that answer as well. I will have to come back to you. I don't understand the question about 18 plus. Oh, sorry. What about younger learners? Well, that's why the Young Youth Guarantee is a joint initiative with DfE. So we do work very closely with our colleagues in Department of Education, and they obviously prevention is part of the pillar, and ensuring that, as I say, we don't only just address the stock of the needs, but also we prevent the flow of them coming into us. Obviously, DWP itself, although a majority of focus is on 18 plus, so we do work with a 16 to 17-year-olds already, especially those on kind of from the care leaver background. But this is why very much the Youth Guarantee is a joint initiative between DfE and us as well, to make sure that we focus on prevention as well as the stock of needs.
Should we pick up Katia on the point? Sorry, Jack. I mean, Liz, you put a good point in the sidebar. I think the honest answer to that question is, given where we are with the Youth Trailblazers, which is that they are still quite at fairly early stages. So I think Katia mentioned we're still waiting for a few grant agreements to come back. I would watch this space on this. I don't think they're quite in that position to have kicked that off. Katia, would you say that's fair? Yeah. Sorry, Jack.
Right. Yeah, I'll continue. If anyone does want to put their hand up instead of just asking in the chat, you're very welcome to. It does sometimes make for more of a discussion. Donna, I'll just come to you in 1 second. I'm just going to say, pick up a point here. One point about new provision needs to think about people with neurodiversity and access to IT equipment. And then we'll come to you. Donna, if you put your hand up.
Thank you, and apologies, I think some of these points are coming through in the chat. So I work for Ambitious About Autism. We were actually really surprised at the white paper, as well as the Trailblazers, and almost the lack of focus on disability and neurodisability. And I know, like we said, it's very early days, but when we're talking about the panels and obviously that need to reduce needs, it is critical that we focus on inclusion of disabled groups. So I guess my concern at the moment is that in the lived experience, if there isn't already clearly identified lived experience at all of that for all of those marginalised communities, then actually we run the risk of this programme not being made inclusive and not targeting those who are in the greatest need. So I guess my question is, unless I've missed something, what are you doing about that, and what opportunities might there be for organisations such as ourselves to actually impart some of that knowledge, or be part of the policy making?
So it's a good shout. And hi, Donna. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being the brave one, popping your hand up. It's always a bit lonely being on this side of the camera. So I mean, Katia might pick up as well. So I think probably the first thing is there's lots and lots of opportunity for organisations to get involved, which is, I think, part of why we're here today. I think the simple answer to your question is, I think a lot of this will come out of the Charlie Mayfield review, which is the independent review on what particularly employers can do to make that workplace, I won't say more attractive, that's the wrong thing to say, but to make the workplace more suitable for customers who want to join that particular workforce. So I think we see quite a lot coming out of that. But Donna, very happy to pick up a chat with you separately about how your organisation can contribute as well, because a key part of this, and I can't say this enough, is the government's view that this should absolutely be an approach that is designed by everybody in the system, not just DWP or another government organisation. So Donna, perhaps I'll touch base with you outside if that's okay. Katia, did you want to come in and save me from myself?
Yeah, well, so basically also completely understand, and I think that's why what I wanted to really highlight is that each local area is identifying their challenges. There are, I was just going through my notes, there are three, from the top of my head, there are 3 areas where they have specific focus on it's not necessarily neurodivergent, but it is like mental health challenges, and some are focusing on also kind of population with neurodivergent needs. So, and there are 3 that are specifically focusing on, so 3 definitely have programs, and then there are additional 3, and I might try to pop it into the chat if I find it, which we're also thinking about kind of broader mental health conditions and helping young people with them. So I think at the end of the day, like, we are trying to learn this, and they're all very, very different. These trailblazers are very different. They looked at their population, they looked where the gaps and provisions are, and they're trying to make sure that they are identifying those young people and helping them, and we'll need to learn from them. As I say, just because it's not on top of my head in terms of the fact that there isn't a young person with lived experience with autism, it doesn't mean there is one on the youth panel. And as Nick says, there's definitely opportunities to feed in all of this. This is a year where we're learning, where we're listening, where we're trialing. This is not something that we're saying, well, we'll take this and we'll roll it out. So I think it's about kind of engaging with us, engaging with each of the local authorities, bringing questions like you have done now, so we can make sure that we do it right when we do roll it out, basically. So helpful to hear from you, but as I say, we're not going to have all the answers, whatever it is, 6 weeks into the new financial year, but also it doesn't mean that everything is absolutely fixed and nothing can be moved. So
thank you. And just to say, I think one of the concerns is that we could end up going down the same route as we always have done in the past, whereby we look at the NEET population as a whole, and actually what ends up happening is those who could progress into employment naturally do, because the policy and those systemic changes aren't put into place, which means that those who get left behind continue to get left behind. So I think there's a real opportunity here, like you said, with reform and government willing to take quite bold changes and challenges on. But in reality, we should be designing this from the beginning with those marginalised communities being based on it. Otherwise, we could build policy around others. So I've said my piece, but thank you so much. It's really interesting to hear from you.
Thanks a lot, Donna. So we've got a bit of a queue going on now. So I'm going to go to Sandra quickly first, and then we'll work our way down.
Hi, thanks. I think a lot of people are, I'm apologise, I came late into the call, I was struggling to get on. I think my internet's playing up a bit. Anyway, I might have missed this, it might have been said, and I know in the chat a lot of people are saying about Kickstart and stuff like that. We had a really successful Kickstart scheme, and 50% of the people that we got into the business are still currently in the business as well. I'm just wondering, like, that was a really good way for employers. What is it going to be in it? And I might have missed this. What is it in it for employers to be involved in this? And will they, will all employers be encouraged to be involved?
Thanks, Sandra. And no worries. So yes, a bit of personal bias creeping in. I was a massive fan of the Kickstart scheme as well. If we look at the formal evaluation, it really, really did work, and I firmly believe it changed a lot of young people's lives.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we are in a different space now, though, in terms of where we are from availability of jobs, etc. But a key part of the Get Britain working paper is how we can engage more with employers, and I think what Catty has talked about in terms of those trailblazers as well is a really key thing, because I know, and I don't know, Catty, whether you want to give a flavour of any of these, but within some of those trailblazers, there's certainly areas around how we might engage with employers more, because I don't know if you might have missed this, as I say, Sandra, because you joined a little bit late. It's fine. No, it doesn't matter. But some of the reason we're only about 20 to 25% of employers, I think, do engage with us, and that is a real challenge, because what we want is for a young person to come into a job centre, as they did with Kickstart, and for there to be such a wealth of opportunities, whether that's learning opportunities, whether that's work experience opportunities, or whether it's a job, that literally there is such a menu of choices that the young person walks out with something really tangible, which, as I said, is either an intervention to help them get to work or that opportunity. But again, I think part of that will come out of the Mayfield review of employers. But Catty, did you want to come in and say anything, perhaps specifically on the trailblazers? Because I think you might have put a comment in the sidebar.
In terms of employers, I say, I think so. This was because trailblazers are led by MCAs, right? So we're engaging with them to understand that what they're spending the money is appropriate and meets all the proprietary rules and kind of meets their policy aims. But it's very much for the mayoral combined authorities. We call them mayoral strategic authorities because I think of London. It's for them to identify. But obviously, as I say, it's about bringing local, national government, third-party sector organizations, third sector organizations, employers all together. In certain areas, they are trialing out basically akin to Kickstart schemes, because that's the areas where they find that the reason why most of their young people have not gotten to employment is due to the lack of work experience, due to lack of the fact that they haven't actually, not even work experience, but just never had a job. So they are basically like working with local employers to create local opportunities for young people, ranging from work experience to something a bit more like Kickstart, where you would pay for X amount of months for somebody to go and do a job. So in Trailblazers, but as I say, it's not everywhere. Some areas are focusing, for example, on bus fares and kind of making sure young people can get into work. For the care leavers ones, for example, they're focusing more about individual support and kind of almost having a point person for that particular person, but also giving them starter packs. So it's really quite different. So it's not universally in each of the areas they are doing things like Kickstart, but it is universal that they're engaging with employers to make sure that there are opportunities for young people in their particular areas. So it's quite a range of support that basically they're testing, but it's almost, as I say, it's local problems and local solutions and testing out for the year of what really works in particular areas and what can be replicated nationwide.
Thanks both. We'll come to Eva now.
Hi there. So yeah, I'm Eva. I'm from Reading Partnership, and it's really interesting to hear that kind of dynamic between the local, very localized trailblazers and then these broader kind of national commitments that we're making. And I guess I'm conscious we're very early in on the trailblazers, and we really welcome this kind of testing, figuring out what's working. I found that kind of what you said about building a national blueprint really, really promising. I guess for our side, we're really keen to understand the timeline. So really conscious that obviously the trailblazers are going out, but while that's happening, there's parts of the country that aren't getting that injection of investment and support. So in terms of those internal evaluations and then the external evaluation, have we got kind of a pipeline to when we can expect to see those findings, and then that leading to sort of a more nationwide consistent approach in terms of the youth guarantee?
I mean, so being a typical civil servant, we have a spending review, and a spending review will kind of obviously at the moment we only have 1 year, and that's why the trailblazers are focusing on 1 year, because we haven't been given any clarity in terms of future funding. So obviously it is a manifesto commitment of making sure that the youth guarantee is for all 18 to 21-year-olds for England. So we're basically in negotiations with Treasury to make sure that there is kind of funding to ensure a national rollout. But it's all kind of pinned on the spending review. In terms of, I feel like there was a second question you said. Oh, evaluation. So the internal evaluation, we're basically, obviously we'll need to finish with a year. So we kind of, unfortunately, we are driving the car and building it at the same time. So we are engaging with each local area on a monthly basis, and on quarterly basis, they have to kind of provide us with specific management information in terms of how each of their programs are going and how they're spending money at home and people have the help, etc. But obviously that will be kind of an ongoing evaluation. The program is supposed to run for a year, and then you would gather it all together, you'll evaluate it, and then have a thing. So in terms of like earliest proper, this is what 1 year has done, it's going to be well into 2026, just by virtue of the fact that we started in April 2025, we'll finish in April 2026, and you need to analyze it. But we are working with areas to get information. As I say, we talk to them more regularly than monthly, but we have a proper monthly check-in, and then we have a quarterly kind of requirement for them to give us a number of management information kind of data points to make sure that we can understand how each of the programs is performing. And because each of the programs, some programs are fairly small, because it could be quite expensive. So we do need to also think about how you combine similar things to make it statistically viable as well. But we have a team of analysts that work with the local authorities, and each of the local authorities, as part of their funding, have been expected to kind of make sure that they have a proper analyst resource onto this as well.
Thanks, Katia. Sorry, Jack, just even because you raised a really good point, and I'll just say it again because I think it's really important to emphasise that. DWP have been really clear that this genuinely has to be driven by colleagues in the areas that understand their local labour markets, and that's not to say that DWP doesn't in those areas, but we really want these solutions to come from Merrill Combined Authority colleagues working with partners across the system. So we are, when I say we're taking a light touch approach, DWP hasn't said thou shalt do A, B and C. We have really said to our partners, come to us and tell us what you think works, and provided that, from a public accounts perspective, meets certain policy rules, we've gone with that. So as these start to roll out a bit more, and I think I might have seen a colleague put, David, I think you put something in the sidebar, thanks for that, about some of the trailblazers in London. As these start to evolve, really, my absolute ask would be for everyone to get involved, because there is some really exciting stuff that's being planned out there. And as Katia said, whilst I think, we won't see the outcomes of those, well, clearly, until the trailblazers are finished, which will be next year and they're evaluated, I think this does signal a really, really different way of working, which I hope will be really positive. Sorry, Jeff.
No, that's great. Thanks, Nick. Okay, so I'm conscious of time. We've got 3 more questions to work through with people with their hands up, and then that should leave us with 15 minutes for you to sort of get some views from the room. Nick, so Simon.
Thanks, Jack. And yeah, nice to meet you, Nick and Katia. Thanks for giving us your time. Really encouraged to hear about your links with Department for Education, as I think a lot of the NEET problems start significantly earlier than a young person arriving in DWP or Job Centre Plus system. But I think one area just that that is a slight concern with devolution, I agree completely that it should be local organisations that are driving based on local priorities. I think there's a slight gap currently in terms of accountability for engagement of, in DWP terms, economically inactive, but in sort of a youth world, hidden NEET young people. It's to an extent an unknown quantity. You can look at the population and take away how many people are NEET. But I suppose to hopefully just sow a seed in your decision making when working with local authorities, just making it really clear who's accountable for identifying and engaging NEETs. As local authorities have their statutory requirement to report, they don't have a statutory requirement to engage. And it's that engagement piece that's absolutely critical. And I'm sure you find the same across the Job Centre Plus estate, that engaging people is the most critical activity to then help them move forward. So sharing nothing more than something that eats away at me, because I'm a big fan of a clear line of sight and accountability. And at the moment, that engagement of economically inactive or hidden NEETs seems a little ambiguous.
Thanks, Simon. And I'll let Katia give a view, because again, she's much more experienced in this than me, which wouldn't be hard. But I think again, that's a really key point that we're trying to bring out in those trailblazers too. How do we track? So I have just sharing a bit of personal stuff. I have 2 children. You probably don't need to ask my children the question. What you need to ask, and what we need to try and find as we go through these trailblazers, as you say, is who are the people that we're not speaking to? Who are the people that when you say the 3 letters DWP, go, oh my gosh, I'm not going anywhere near them, or I'm not going anywhere near government. Yeah. How do we get to those hidden groups in communities? I think that is the perennial challenge for us, but certainly it's one of the things that, as we've looked at some of the trailblazer bids, I've looked at and thought that's quite clever. You are really trying to make the effort there of trying to get under the skin, because it's not, to a certain degree, obviously the young people that come into our job centres and access all of our services are really important, and we want to help them, but just as important are those people that don't engage with us and are out there and don't see. So I'm with you, but Katia, did you want to add anything?
I think definitely agree with Nick. I think that's, as I say, part of the testing here is to make sure that, as I say, we know people who are on benefits, but obviously the inactive group is growing. And it's really important, and that's why we need to work with local authorities to see how, and some of them have really interesting ways. Obviously, there is like working with colleges and local schools and making sure that you kind of reach out. So a lot of them are testing of how do you, as I say, kind of prevent them, because local authorities are responsible for kind of knowing where their young people are until they're 18, and then basically that stops. So it's for them basically to understand how do we carry on understanding who they are, how do we help them, how do we engage them with the labour market or training opportunities and not leave them. So that's exactly what they're testing out, and that's why, in effect, that's why we need the local knowledge and local links and connections. And then we'll see whether local links and connections are enough, or whether
thank you. I feel better just for sharing that out loud. It's been cathartic for me. So yeah, but thanks both.
Great, thanks all. So we've got Samantha and Annie left to ask a question. Maybe if we could just take them quickly at the same time, and then we'll get answers from Nick and Cassia, and then we can sort of move swiftly on to the final part of the meeting. So Samantha, if you want to ask your question first.
Yeah, so I work across the East Midlands, and I work in the criminal justice system. So I've posed a question about having representation of the justice system on the youth panel, but also mentioned about the neurodivergent and people who struggle to access the services. We work with people 18 plus males, and a lot of those people are anti-establishment. So the fact that they've got to go into DWP, they see that as another government department where they've got to be accountable for. I just think there's could be a lot more work done to include the cohort of people that we work with. And we're doing a lot of work around youth voice, youth ambassadors, to try and engage other sort of authorities with the barriers that our people experience. So it's just really, in the white paper, there wasn't much reference to people with justice experience, criminal justice, and the barriers that those people do have. And it is a big one, and there will be a lot of inactive needs across DWP areas. So it's just a plea really to include that cohort, and we'll be more than happy to do some work with you on that.
Well, thanks, Samantha. And again, I'll let Katia comment, and Jack, this is really useful for us, so we don't need to feel rushed, to be honest, because we're getting a lot of stuff in the sidebar. So Samantha, very happy to pick up outside with you, because genuinely I meant what I said. We are, and I can't remember which, I think it might, Don, I think you might have said it as well. I think we're really keen, and so are ministers, to make sure that we don't lose this opportunity, that we do something really, really different. And so that wider inclusion of as many partners as possible is really key. And certainly also just in terms, again, I know we keep almost branding them as a silver bullet, and they're not supposed to be that. They really are test and learns. But in a lot of our areas, so East Midlands in particular, there's a real focus there on young people in who've had experiences, put like that, of the criminal justice system too. So there's a lot there that I think we can work on and share. But Samantha, let's pick it up outside. I'd really value that conversation.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Hi, Annie, if you want to ask a question.
Yeah, hi, thanks very much. It wasn't actually a question, but I'm a researcher, social policy researcher, that does work on mental health, employment and welfare. And I've been doing a project with people of all ages, but who've got lived experience of mental health problems and work. And I just thought I'd take this opportunity to just say a couple of the key messages from young people that seemed quite relevant. So probably all of the frontline practitioners here, this will not be news, but yeah, I think one thing is just the need for on the engagement piece about job centres trying to reform and be more engaging, that even if a programme is voluntary, it sometimes doesn't feel voluntary, because it then comes with inflexibility of appointment scheduling. It comes with threat of sanctions. Once you've volunteered, everything then becomes compulsory. So I think there's a lot of work needs to be done on making it genuinely feel like a collaboration, and that you're not kind of stepping into this risky space where suddenly everything's under threat and you might come out worse than you went in. Even if that's a misunderstanding on the young person's part, I think just really making sure that marketing and messaging is correct, that this is a mutual collaboration. I think definitely echoed in the research I've done about young people just being unsure what to do. So although they might be there under a mental health guise or whatever, actually the deeper issue is, need really wanting some help to identify what, build on their strengths, have somebody to work with them in a coaching way to find out what they can do and what's out there. But then the third thing I think, which is the really key, is that young people said they've just felt really in at the deep end when they go into work, whether that's been on their own terms or they've been forced in, just getting into a workplace, feeling completely unsupported. They don't know who they can turn to. They don't feel like anybody cares. And I think particularly for vulnerable young people, that need to feel they fit in and they belong in the workplace. You can't just do a sink or swim, because what we saw in this longitudinal research is that young people are just leaving, and they're leaving when there possibly could have been something done to support them, but they don't know who's available to them. They don't feel they're allowed to say they're struggling. Maybe if they do have neurodivergent issues or they've had mental health difficulties, it can be quite a snap decision and no one catches them. So they'll say in their own words, I just walked away and never looked back. But the heartbreaking thing is that nobody knew that they were struggling. So I think, to me, that all points to this sort of key worker model, which I think a lot of the people in the call probably are doing. But that need for that steady person, whether that is somebody that comes from the DWP or the provider side, or whether it's somebody they're linked to in the workplace, that they can go to at that first sign of struggle or uncertainty, rather than just exiting and almost nobody realising something could have been done to support them. So that continuity of key worker that really gets to know that young person. But yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Andy, and that's really useful feedback, and thank you for giving us. I mean, I think absolutely that the quality of that opportunity that is there for the young person, whatever that looks like, whether it's volunteering, whether it's work experience, whether it is a job. I agree with you. We certainly saw it during Kickstart that what was absolutely critical there was making sure that we placed that young person with the right employer. So it wasn't, and I think this is a change, and it's certainly, perhaps I didn't talk a person who's a civil servant, but quite a welcome one from me, that actually what we're actually aiming for here are quality jobs that stick, that when young people, in fact, when any customer goes into that job, that actually they've been properly matched, that the employer understands the customer they're taking on, and that there is less of a chance of that young person or indeed that customer falling out of the labour market. Because certainly what we see, and you as partners in the system will see as well, is that all of us collectively expend an awful lot of time perhaps preparing people for work. But if they go into that job and they then have a bad experience and their confidence is shattered, then they come back into that job centre environment and actually, or any environment, and actually building them back up again and moving them forward. It's quite inefficient because we've done it twice or maybe 3 times, but it also takes a lot longer for that young person in particular to go back into that opportunity. So thanks, Annie. I think I couldn't agree with you more, frankly.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Annie. Nick, I don't know if you have any kind of specific topics you'd like any insight on whilst we've got 10 minutes left. Or... I
mean, it's great, Jack. I mean, it's been, first of all, I think, Simon, you might have come on and said, thanks for us to come along, but the thanks is definitely all the other way for you guys for spending some time with us today, because it is really valuable for us to get your views. As I said, the only question I've got really, and a lot of it's come out in the sidebar and in the conversations that we've had, is really leveraging the experience from this group about what you think and what you know works, either within that wider system or where you've seen really great examples, either in the job centre or in individual environments where you guys know and can say to us that there is a bit of magic and gold dust. And if you spread that, it will move us further forward, because again, we're looking at really different ways of trying things. We're looking at, are there particular locations which could become beacons of excellence from a job centre perspective, where best practice that we know works nationally, we deploy and push really, really hard. But, Jack, I'm happy to take that either on this call, or I can see Elizabeth's face in the sidebar. I'm going to make the same offer that I did before in earlier days, which saw my inbox absolutely mobbed with Kickstart queries, in that for you guys to reflect and come back to me, I'll pop my email address in the sidebar. I'm only at the end of an email. Whilst I'd rather it didn't go out to the wider population, if you see what I mean, you can always come to me with any comments or suggestions that you might have. I'm very happy to take them, Jack, Elizabeth.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Nick. Just as we've got a few minutes left, if anyone has anything they'd like to shout about, examples of best practice, please feel free to put your hand up and, use this opportunity to tell us all, and also colleagues at the DWP. There we go, Sally. Who would like to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, just want to, I've already put it, the first comment is already in the chat, that what Simon was saying about engagement being key. You can't, sorry, Mike was in the wrong place. You can't, engagement absolutely key. You can't engage, you can't support anybody. You could have the best support package in the world, but if you don't actually engage anybody and get them to come and talk to you, then you might as well not bother.
Yeah.
And as you said, so I know your kids know, your kids are engaged, your kids have obviously got you, they've got a supportive family. I'm based on an estate in North Birkenhead, which is just over the river from Liverpool, which has, at the moment, we think from some research that's been done, the highest level of adults, working age adults out of work, second highest level in the country. So those working adults, age adults, once upon a time were young people. If we don't start engaging and sort of get those young people now, we're going to end up with that next generation of young people turning into adults as they go along. And one of the things that we've really found, we're one of the 10 Jobs Plus pilots, and that thing of being really, really local, right in the heart of the estate. This is a tough area to crack. There's, a lot of kids around here who haven't seen parents or grandparents work. It's not the norm. It's trying to get that, and there is that distrust of, I always feel guilty when I say this to people from the DWP. They don't like you. They don't trust you. They they see you as being sort of, the enemy sometimes, almost, with some of the attitudes that we hear from you. And it's how you can sort of doing some of the work to break down that by working with the different partners, and being so hyper local. I mean, we are the smallest pilot. We literally work with 384 households, but we're really getting to know people and the things around the barriers to work. It's not there's nothing about employability. Employability is like, that's a distant country over there somewhere that they might think about eventually. It's the basics, like they don't have Wi-Fi, they haven't got access to SIM cards. So even things like, you want to go and get yourself signed on a course at college where you need to take your birth certificate. Well, they don't know where it is. So most of our support over the last 12 months that we've been here has been the plus bit of Jobs Plus. We've bought birth certificates, driving licenses, got people to, there's one lad we're working with, we've got him to go to Tesco's with us for a coffee just to get him going. So I think looking at all those engagement in like the wider sense and the challenges in the wider sense has got to be the key.
Thanks, Sally. And you were very polite, but no, I mean, we see it as well. And where we see probably some of our greater engagement with young people are through, for example, our youth hub services, through our outreach services, where actually it's not necessarily seen as someone from the DWP, because I mean, we see it too. We see the stigma. It's a great ambition to get the job centre service to be seen as a service for all citizens, but the how is a massive answer, a massive question and a perennial problem. And I think, as I say, where we see some of our best services, and by our, I'm not talking about DWP, I'm talking about all of the services joining up together, are where we work much more closely with partners in the local community. Again, very closely linked to the youth trailblazers. But I think increasingly the lens that we're trying to take is, it shouldn't be about who delivers it, if you see what I mean, because bluntly, what I care about is that that young person gets into a job. Quite who enables that? There might be a bit of DWP, there might be a bit of DFE, there might be a bit of local partner. It's working out what that mix is. But increasingly, Sally, we're seeing more of our services being delivered out there in the community rather than from a job centre, because exactly as you said, and if you're a young person potentially with quite complex needs, or anyone with complex needs, coming into that job centre can seem like a really big deal. It can seem like a really big deal. And if we can break that barrier down by going out and actually working directly with employers, as I say, in youth hubs, in charities, in GP surgeries, we are well up for that.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Nick. I'm just quickly going to flag, before I forget, a couple of ERSA things that we've got coming up, and then Tony, I'll come to you to close off the meeting. So we're holding another youth employment conference in September. We're selling tickets now, and there's going to be lots of information coming out in the next few weeks about the agenda for that. Later this month, we're going to be releasing a report on the last 40 years of youth employment interventions in the UK, which touches on a lot of the themes that have come up today. So look out for us announcing the launch event of that in the next few days. And finally, a little bit of a call, which I'm going to send out to the mailing list later today. We are looking for anyone who would willingly donate some photos from their provision that we could potentially use in the graphic design version of our report. So if you're that type of organization, please get in touch with the email that I'm going to put in the chat now. And then I will hand over to Tony to make the last comment of the day.
Thank you. I'll be very, very quick. I just wanted to, Nick and Katya's session hugely inspiring. There's loads going on. I just want to, as you would imagine, talk about employers. And I think it's been hinted at quite a lot here. But of late, we've had some really different types of employers actually coming through to work with us, like the Financial Times. I've worked with KPMG. I'm working with Savills. I'm working with Microsoft, LinkedIn. The types of employers historically you think may not directly want to be coming into our job centres, but they are. KPMG, for instance, now are committing to give us all their vacancies, access to all our vacancies via Find a Job, and come in and help us with recruitment for their internships, apprenticeships. So really riding on the back of what Katya and Nick has said, I think it's a crucial role that we get that right for those employers coming in and using our services. But I'm really, really positive about the fact that we have had a number in coming to do mentoring circles, offer volunteering opportunities, offer our young people sort of a different view of the world, which as you say, then goes quite a way to changing that perception young people may have. Well, actually, I may not be able to get that kind of job at DW, but you can. There are those opportunities now. And working in spirit of partnership, I think it's very, very positive time. So just thought I'd throw that in. But great session.
Thanks a lot, Tony. Brilliant. Well, we'll close up now, just as we approach 12 o'clock. Thanks so much, Nick and Katya, for giving your time today. I think it's really important that DWP engages effectively with the employment support sector, and I'm sure people on this call really appreciated the update on all things youth. And I suppose now we just eagerly await what happens after the kind of year of Trailblazers and work together to kind of implement the learning from those. So thanks again, and thanks everyone for attending. Look out for the things that I've put in the chat, and we'll see you in later this month for the launch of our report.